In a tense Washington courtroom, Judge Amy Berman Jackson sat with a firm gaze, prepared to address what she believed was an open and shut matter. Facing her was Jasmine Crockett, a bold congresswoman whose sharp tongue had sparked headlines. Amy believed she'd seen it all, and today she was ready to make an example out of Crockett. But as the court settled, Jasmine rose herself and not her lawyer saw and addressed the judge directly. Calm, focused, and commanding, she began unpacking the prosecution's case, piece by piece, citing legal codes, precedent, and constitutional provisions so fluently that even the judge blinked in surprise. This wasn't a mere politician, this was a woman who knew the law inside out. Jasmine's voice carried confidence, not arrogance. She reminded the court she was not just a public official but a trained attorney with years of courtroom experience. She challenged the contempt charge by walking through every legal standard, showing where the claims against her failed to meet the burden. Amy Berman Jackson leaned forward, hands clasped, watching carefully. Jasmine quoted case law with precision, dissecting the prosecution's arguments with such clarity that the courtroom fell silent. Reporters who had come expecting a sensational takedown began scribbling furiously, realizing they were witnessing something far more remarkable than a political squabbling. It was a legal masterclass. The prosecutor tried to interrupt, objecting that Representative Crockett should let her lawyers speak. But Jasmine stood firm, saying, "With respect, I am fully competent to address the court on this matter, Your Honor." Jackson raised a brow, curious. She allowed Jasmine to continue, and what followed was a brilliant legal argument weaving constitutional protections, procedural rules, and recent case precedents. Jasmine was not just defending herself as she was educating the courtroom. Every point she made was backed by precise citations, and every counterpoint anticipated. Her legal mind was on full display, and even veteran court watchers murmured among themselves at the skill unfolding before them. Judge Jackson, known for her sharpness, began asking Jasmine pointed questions, pushing back on some claims. But Jasmine handled each with steady composure, offering case details, legislative context, and legal reasoning that left no doubt she had done her homework. She argued why the contempt charges were procedurally flawed, why the alleged defamation fell under protected political speech, and why the notion of obstruction mischaracterized her actions. As she spoke, her legal team watched with pride, and her political aides exchanged wide-eyed glances. This was no ordinary defense. This was the kind of performance that rewrites reputations. Amy Berman Jackson taped her gavel lightly, signaling a break. In the gallery, reporters rushed to send updates, some whispering, "She's running circles around them." Jasmine sat quietly, reviewing her notes, calm as ever. The prosecutor looked rattled, shuffling papers and whispering urgently with his team. When the judge returned, she addressed Jasmine directly. "Representative Crockett, I must say, your legal argumentation is unusually thorough." Jasmine nodded respectfully, "Thank you, Your Honor." But Jasmine wasn't finished. She moved into the next section, arguing why pretrial detention would be improper and unnecessary, citing federal guidelines and contrasting her case with recent, more severe examples. Jasmine explained that detention decisions should weigh flight risk and public danger, neither of which applied here. She wasn't just making claims, she cited judicial rulings, Department of Justice guidelines, and the very standards Judge Jackson herself had applied in past cases. The judge frowned slightly, recognizing Jasmine's preparation. The prosecutor, seeing his momentum slipping, argued for a gag order at least, citing media disruptions. Jasmine smoothly countered, explaining how such a restriction would amount to prior restraint, violating established free speech protections. She referenced landmark First Amendment cases, describing how political speech enjoys broad protection even when controversial or uncomfortable. By now, the energy in the room had shifted. Reporters typed faster, realizing this was no longer about contempt, it was about a brilliant legal mind standing up to power. Jasmine anticipated every argument, addressed every concern, and did it without grandstanding. She was surgical, not theatrical. Even Judge Jackson, who had intended to bring down the hammer, was recalibrating. This was a defendant she hadn't expected, not defiant out of ego, but confident out of mastery. As the prosecutor raised yet another point, Jasmine gently but firmly pointed out its flaws. showing how the legal standard had been misapplied. The gallery grew more attentive with each passing minute. Jasmine invoked the speech or debate clause, explaining how legislators are shielded when speaking out in their official roles. She showed that the charges, at their core, threatened the balance of powers by punishing a member of Congress for fulfilling her constitutional duties. Judge Jackson leaned back thoughtfully, occasionally glancing at her law clerk. She knew she couldn't dismiss these arguments lightly. Jasmine, meanwhile, stayed focused, outlining legal principles with the kind of fluency that comes only from deep study and lived experience. She was, without question, in command. Finally, after hours of back and forth, Judge Jackson called for a final recess. When she returned, her tone was notably more measured. She commended both sides for their preparation but acknowledged that Representative Crockett had presented compelling legal defenses. She denied the request for pretrial detention, citing Jasmine's detailed arguments, and expressed caution about restricting public speech, noting the constitutional stakes. Jasmine's team smiled subtly, but Jasmine herself remained composed, offering a quiet nod of thanks. The courtroom exhaled, and reporters dashed out to broadcast the breaking news. Jasmine Crockett had not only defended herself, she had stunned the entire legal establishment. Outside the courthouse, a crowd had gathered, microphones thrust forward, cameras rolling. Jasmine stepped up, delivering a brief, thoughtful statement. She spoke of respect for the legal process, the importance of constitutional protections, and her commitment to continue her public service undeterred. She emphasized that this moment was bigger than her, that it was about defending the right of every American to speak, challenge, and hold institutions accountable. Her calm, articulate words only deepened the impression she had left inside the courtroom. Her team stood behind her, visibly proud, while reporters scrambled to capture every quote. As Jasmine walked away, supporters cheered softly, while legal analysts began dissecting her performance on news channels and online platforms. Headlines blazed across the internet. Jasmine Crockett, legal genius. Judge surprised by Crockett's defense, a politician who knows the law. Podcasts debated whether this marked the rise of a new national legal figure, while commentators praised her fluency and poise. Jasmine, back in her car, quietly reviewed notes on her phone, already thinking not about the next news cycle, but about the legislative battles waiting in Congress, the legal reforms she could champion, and the new political opportunities now within reach. Inside the courthouse, Judge Jackson sat quietly in her chambers, reflecting. She had come prepared to discipline a loudmouthed politician, but she had encountered something else entirely, a brilliant, methodical legal strategist. While the judge maintained her professional distance, she couldn't help but admire Jasmine's preparation and intellect. She made a note in her files, quietly acknowledging that underestimating Crockett had been a mistake. Meanwhile, Jasmine's legal team gathered to debrief, analyzing what had worked, what surprised them, and what their next moves should be. They knew today's victory was significant, and not just legally, but politically. Across Washington, phones buzzed as political allies and rivals alike took note. Some saw opportunity, others saw warning. Jasmine Crockett had shown that she wasn't just a fiery voice on the House floor, she was a force who could hold her own in any legal arena. Invitations began flowing in, speaking engagements at law schools, interviews on major networks, requests to appear on legal panels. Jasmine accepted only a few, mindful that the real work was still ahead. She remained focused on the constituents she represented, the policies she wanted to advance, and the systemic changes she believed were urgently needed. In the weeks that followed, Jasmine's courtroom performance became a case study in political and legal circles. Law professors used it to teach the importance of preparation and constitutional literacy. Political strategists pointed to it as a lesson in staying ahead of opponents. Civil rights activists saw it as a hopeful sign that legal brilliance still had power in the public arena. Jasmine herself kept her head down, balancing legal strategy with political advocacy. She began collaborating with legal scholars on justice reform proposals, using the momentum from her courtroom triumph to push for broader, lasting changes. Her political opponents, meanwhile, scrambled to recalibrate. What they had thought would be a political takedown had instead elevated Jasmine's stature. Attack ads were quietly shelved, new strategies were drawn up. Jasmine's supporters, energized by her courtroom display, rallied behind her, boosting fundraising numbers and amplifying her platform. In private, Jasmine reminded her team to stay grounded, knowing that today's victories could easily become tomorrow's challenges. She remained determined to keep her focus on serving her district, advocating for her beliefs, and using her legal expertise to navigate the increasingly complex political landscape. Judge Amy Berman Jackson, back on the bench, continued presiding over other cases, but occasionally her mind flicked back to the day Jasmine Crockett had stood in her courtroom. It wasn't often that a defendant impressed her, not with bluster, but with pure legal mastery. She found herself sharing the story in private conversations, a reminder that the courtroom can still surprise even the most seasoned judges. She took it as a professional lesson. Never underestimate the person standing before you. Meanwhile, Jasmine continued building her reputation, balancing political work with legal advocacy, setting a new standard for what public servants could achieve. As months passed, Jasmine's influence grew. She was invited to contribute to legal journals, to advise on legislation, to speak at national conferences. She used each platform carefully, staying focused on systemic issues and avoiding the temptation to gloat over past victories. Her courtroom success became a symbol for young lawyers, especially women and people of color, showing that brilliance and preparation could break through even the most rigid expectations. Jasmine began mentoring young attorneys, offering guidance on navigating both legal and political arenas, and sharing her belief that the two were deeply intertwined in the fight for justice. Inside Congress, Jasmine's stature shifted. Colleagues who once saw her as a mere firebrand now treated her as a serious legal thinker. She formed new alliances, worked on complex legislative proposals, and continued challenging entrenched systems. Her ability to weave legal arguments into political debate set her apart, making her both admired and, at times, feared. She stayed grounded, reminding herself daily of the communities she represented and the promises she had made. Each legal challenge, each political battle, became part of a larger mission, to fight for fairness, equity, and accountability at every level. Media attention remained steady, but Jasmine kept her focus. She carefully selected the moments when she would speak publicly about the courtroom experience, using those moments to highlight systemic issues rather than personal triumphs. She knew the real victory wasn't in winning one legal battle, but in shifting the public conversation about justice, speech, and power. Her legal team continued to support her, navigating ongoing cases and preparing for new challenges. Together, they worked not just to defend Jasmine's rights, but to expand protections for others, pushing for reforms that would benefit countless Americans facing similar struggles. And so, the story of Judge Amy Berman Jackson and Jasmine Crockett settled into Washington lore, a tale of a judge prepared to deliver discipline, only to encounter a legal genius who rewrote the script. For Jasmine, it marked just one chapter in a larger journey, a journey defined by brilliance, resilience, and unwavering commitment to justice. She walked forward with purpose, knowing that every courtroom, every legislative chamber, every public square was another opportunity to make change. For Judge Jackson, it was a humbling reminder that the law is alive, dynamic, and always capable of surprising even its most seasoned stewards.